All right. And what was the text that you sent? We exchanged so many texts this morning. I can't remember which particular one you're alluding to. So why don't you do a dramatic reading of it, and then we'll
Okay,
go from
I'll
there.
do a dramatic reading of the text. So just to say that this was not the text that I sent you of the AI generated image of a Texas police officer holding hands with Jesus and the Easter Bunny. This was the text I sent after that.
Okay.
Okay, so here, Ben. What if I told you that the strategy for uniting America against fascism was drafted on a Saturday in 1984 in the Chicago suburbs at the fictional Shermer High School, and that it ties together everything we've been talking about as angry, bewildered Americans try to make sense of unprecedented times and rewrite our relationships to institutions and each other?
Yeah.
What do you think of my theory?
I have no idea. I got that text while I was enjoying a delicious breakfast with a friend, and I was like, "What is she talking about?" But I didn't want to interrupt my delicious breakfast with my friend. So why don't you say what exactly there's something happening in that text. Okay, it's like a Bob Dylan song. Something is happening in that text. But I'm not quite sure what it is. Do you, Mr. Jones? Sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And by the way, you notice how I restrained myself tonight? I did not feel compelled to tell anybody who Bob Dylan was. I did not feel compelled to say what Mr. Jones is. I have really changed. Okay. Anyway, what's going on in that text?
Okay, so I sent you that text because we were talking about this idea of, under this kind of rising authoritarianism, a lot of people are questioning their beliefs, trying to re-understand America. How did we get here? Where are we? What will we do tomorrow? And I described it as a moment of political adolescence for individuals and for all of us collectively. And so on a fictional Saturday in 1884, a group of teenagers were sentenced to an 8-hour detention to write a 1,000-word essay about who they really are. That was the plot of the movie The Breakfast Club. And so
you threw me off with 84. I believe that wasn't it 86.
It's a younger reference that.
No, but wasn't it? Okay, this is how I'm so literal. Okay,
I thought it was set in 84. So you could be right, but my point being that
that's what threw me.
We are all in detention right now.
Yeah,
we're all in detention, and we're going to spend the day together. We are going to question our relationships to each other. We are going to maybe do a little dancing, take some mind-altering substances. And, one of the things, I mean, this is really goofy, right? It's a really goofy theory. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about the Breakfast Club as kind of an enduring piece of culture is that it really, or John Hughes' work in general, even though lots of stuff has been, problematic after the fact, whatever you want to call it, is that what those kids do in that room is reevaluate themselves in the context of the school, of the past, of their present, of their future. And they spend a lot of time talking about their parents, which is really, really odd. But they sort of talk about, like, how did we get here? All of us came into this room different ways. None of us really believe that we belong here. We all think Judd Nelson should be here. And they talk a lot about, fear and trauma and how, in a regular day, they would not be speaking to each other. They would be sort of exerting different social forces on each other. But here, locked in this room, they realize that, like, we can't be put into boxes based on our interests, on who other people think we are. We have a common shared interest as people. And if we want and need to continue to grow, we have to fundamentally and structurally change our relationships to each other. So I always start out with something really silly that I think is a nice touchstone for something that's deeper. But I am seeing a lot of people upset for different reasons, but kind of upset about the same thing.
By the
We're
way,
all locked in this room together now.
All right, I'll start with on an insignificant detail, but it was 1985, not 86. But actually, the movie was probably filmed at 84, so you're probably closer. It doesn't matter. That's a total tangent.
I think you have to look up the date on the letter. Because it ends with them reading that letter.
That is correct.
That sort of solidarity proclamation.
Yeah. So here's my question to you. How does this relate to the concept of political adolescence? And which is something else you raised with me. So go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, what's been happening to me is like I have, I don't have my props, but I got this little notebook from a friend of mine. And for the first maybe month of this year, in all of my interactions, as people were telling me how they were doing and what they were up to and what they were thinking, I would just leave a really good interpersonal interaction and just write some notes. Say, so and so told me this, they're worried about this, and just filled up, 15 or 20 pages with capturing these moments of people's worry. And everybody's saying, like, what are we going to do? What should we be doing? Should we be going to this training? Should we be joining this group? Should we, like, how are we ever going to be ready for this? And so the political adolescence piece comes from it, where I think about how can I be as helpful to other people, but how can I be as compassionate to other people? Because one thing that I am starting to see is that a lot of folks are really critical of each other's tactics. We all got to get down to Daily Plaza, right? We all got to do this. It's this issue. It's that issue. It's fascism. It's such and such. Why weren't there more young people out here? Where are all the Black organizers? Just everybody has their thought about what they're going to do in this moment. But something that feels really different to me than other times is, and they need to also understand what you are doing and kind of have this judgment. And to me, it just reminded me of high school, right? We are all going through this really challenging, very emotional phase of, understanding who we are in the context of our family, society, taking some beliefs, swapping them out from others. And we're all trying to get to this healthy adulthood and this sort of better life. Some of us are nihilists. Some of us are optimists. Some of us are very popular. Some of us are, everyone is taking these different routes. And, maybe it's a little Breakfast Club, maybe it's a little bit Mean Girls, but we are all sitting at our tables convinced that we need protest. We need the rule of law. We need whatever. Like, I think we need it all. And I think that we've got to get comfortable or get through or get over some of these sitting at different lunch tables to get past the authoritarianism thing. So I'm going to give you one other example that really struck me. So about this the Abreu Garcia case, I had heard somebody saying, they grabbed him. They could grab any one of us.
Yes.
Which fundamentally is true. And this person said, so like, I'm getting ready for them to grab me. And it was a relatively privileged person. It was a white man, and speaking from a place of genuine fear and concern. And I was having lunch with some folks last week, including a bunch of South Asian organizers. And I said, I'm sitting with some ambivalence about this. And I mentioned it, and there was silence. And then a young Muslim woman who's on a student visa just burst out laughing. And it was perfect because, yes, they could take any of us, but they're going to take her before they take you. And so I think as people are kind of trying to relate to this idea of they could take any of us, our lack of connection to each other means the only way we can understand this, or the way that we've been fed this individualist empathy, is it's got to come back to me. They could take me.
Yes.
And it's not enough just to go back to, I think about, we talk about Martin Luther King a lot in America, and our controversial relationship with him over time. But his last speech before the sanitation workers strike, the famous mountaintop speech, he was talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I think the idea is that everybody before they act needs to worry, like, is it going to happen to me? Not, am I the person happening upon someone to whom something has happened, and what will I do? And that's a weird little broken thing about our empathy, that I don't know that I need people to feel like they are going to come for me individually, for me to feel motivated to make them stop coming for someone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I could do the tactic of therapy where I literally repeat to you what you just said to prove that A, I was listening, B, I heard it, and C, I absorbed the message. So if I were to do that, I would say your main message was there's something I don't know, like a waste of time, if you will, or just unnecessary about needing to personalize every issue in this country. So to see what happened to Garcia and to Venezuelans, and should in itself be bad enough. there should be no further need to say it could happen to me. You should be against it.
Good though, because I don't want to criticize someone who's doing this, because again, these are our modes of understanding.
That is correct.
Right. So why do you as a teenager wake up one day and want to dress in a really outrageous way? Right. Like you need to kind of work up to that big rejection. So that person is on their journey to understanding they could grab anyone. What is interesting to me is right now in this moment, people do feel like for some reason they have to personalize it. And I don't know that that's really mentally healthy for folks. And I don't know that that is connecting us to each other. So I think one of the things, we go back to that diffusion of innovation communications marketing model, there are always going to be people for whom like due process is tantamount. Let's call them, those people were always going to freak out about them grabbing people off the street. And those people were freaking out when they were grabbing people off the street and sending them to Guantanamo. And to kind of go back to a point you and I talked about, those people were freaking out when they were grabbing them off the street and sending them to Home and Square. Right? Those people very much know that in America, you should not, but sometimes it happens that a person will be grabbed off the street without due process, and they might be tortured, they might be detained, all of these things might happen. Those folks are not surprised by this happening, but I think what those folks are surprised by is how many people are kind of touched and really furious about this moment. So then you have your next group of people for whom the fact that I think it is really good to counter that message of them saying, oh, he's a gang member, he's whatever, for people to say, this is a dad, he's a Maryland dad, for them to talk about his union apprenticeship, for them to get folks who know him and they're like, this is just a guy, right? This is just a guy. And that's been a really successful tactic with a lot of the other folks that they've grabbed, to not let people scare you about strangers. And I think for many, many people, the idea, okay, so for some people, nobody should be grabbed. For other people, nobody should be grabbed without due process. And for somebody like no ordinary person with whom I feel a personal connection, it doesn't have to be me, but if it's just somebody going about their lives, right? Like what's more American than protecting your right to just go about your life? So that's a group of people. And now I think to really bring the outrage in, it's that next big chunk of folks. So they say those late adopters are like a third of your market. They're saying, how do we bring people in that next chunk? Because once we get that next chunk of people, then really we have the majority of the opinions. Then we hit that 80. And so I think that's where the Gavin Newsoms and the Rahm Emanuels and other folks are saying, like, should we do, like, how are we going to bring that chunk of people in? Right? There's a lot of people who are agitated. There's a lot of people who are in the streets. There are a lot of people who are kind of continuing their long-term and short-term resistance work. But we need that chunk of people to come off the sidelines and to start involving themselves in one way or another in bringing about, a slowdown or an end to our current situation. And I think everyone's trying to figure out what's it going to take to move those people.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is a variety of those tactics.
Well, and so to your point, in the same essay by Aaron Blake that I've alluded to, there is a picture of a social media post by the White House.
Where they edited the headlines?
No, oh my God, we talked about that in the show last week. No, this is a different one. The same White House. Apparently, they taught the White House how to tweet. I don't actually know what you call it. X, I guess, to X. And so this, I will now show you on my phone. There we go. Just to show you that it's a real thing. You can't see that, so I just wanted to show you that I actually am not.
I saw the Oval Office curtains. They're very recognizable.
Yes. So anyway, the White House, and there's a photo back next to each other. There's one of the senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, meeting with Garcia in El Salvador. Man, that was what a trip that was, the way the president of El Salvador set that up to make it look like these guys were at an upscale hotel drinking margaritas. And then right next to it is a picture of Donald Trump in the Oval Office meeting with a woman who I didn't recognize, but is apparently the relative of someone who was murdered by an immigrant. Okay. So, and the headline is, "We are not the same." And so what Aaron Blake's point is that Donald Trump is brilliant at turning some outrageous thing that he's done into a political statement that most Americans would agree with or most voting Americans would agree with, and that it doesn't matter if it's wrong. It doesn't matter if it's unconstitutional. It doesn't matter if we wouldn't want to be treated that way. The fact of the matter is, we like it and they don't. That's what Donnie's been really good at. And so that's the point you're making about high school cafeteria, which is that effectively Donald Trump understands and buys into your theory, Denali, that we're all kids in a high school cafeteria and we only want to hang out with our own. And so the underlying message is that the Democrats represent gangbangers, even though, one more time, there is no proof whatsoever that this gentleman is a gangbanger. Or even if you were a gangbanger, that's still not how we do things in America.
But pause here, because remember that in January, way back in January, several years ago, January of this year, that feels like several years ago, the Lincoln Riley Act came up to vote. And I think it's really interesting to put these two things side by side, because one of them is saying that, you know, in the language of the bill, due process should not apply to people who have certain immigration status, even though they are in the physical United States and therefore in the jurisdiction of the American judicial system. And that bill got a lot of traction, right? And again, it was named after somebody who was killed by a person, you know, an undocumented person. And I think comparing the framing of something like the Lincoln Riley Act to something where people have really, really tenaciously been stripping away every layer of propaganda the moment it hits. Yeah, you know, Donald Trump's going to put something out there like that, and folks are going to say the same thing that you said on the show last week. That says, how is the fact that these two people came from the same country, how does that make them the same person? Like, it is amazing how quickly we have gotten from being able to have you know, kind of change the law or make the law based on the idea that undocumented people should be put into a parallel justice system. And now we are at a point where I think like a lot of kind of regular people are like, whoa, we don't really like the idea that you are taking apart due process. And we kind of like it when it's simple and that, you know, everybody who is here goes through the justice system. So I think that's tremendous movement in public opinion between the end of January and the end of April.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm thinking about that. I've not seen, I'll put it, there's been some signs that are different. And the one that so many of my liberal friends have been telling me about is a column by David Brooks, who writes. Wait, am I not allowed to identify anybody anymore?
No, I just I've been watching people's heads explode
over David Brooks. Yeah,
David Brooks dying for the revolution.
Yeah, and but I'm just thinking back to my pledge at the outset of the show. Am I?
You should identify people. No, it's.
I should identify them. Okay, but I shouldn't identify them by making fun of millennials, assuming that they don't know who David Brooks is. So anyway, David Brooks is a columnist for the New York Times, who is the quintessential conservative columnist who pretends that he's not really conservative, and has mastered the art, I will, of weaseling out on one great issue or another. But out of nowhere, this guy grew a backbone. And he wrote a column last week, I want to say, that has blown the collective minds of liberals from one end of the country to the other. And the theme of that column is that we have to take to the street. It ends with him saying, like, he's going to take to the streets, that Trump has gone too far. And one of the things that Trump's done that he cites is just scooping people off the street without saying what they've done. You know what I mean? Like without feeling compelled to formally announce why they scooped him off the streets. And so the fact that a guy like David Brooks would write a column like that, Denali, is to me a suggestion that we are in a better place than we were in January. I agree with that point. David Brooks is someone I would never think of remotely being an ally on any important issue.